las tecnologías de la información y las comunicacaciones para la implementación de los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible.
FAO, Trisha Baltasar, sorry. From Canto, and Ernesto Rodriguez Hernandez, Director General, IT Director General, Ministry of Communications of Cuba. For this session, we are going to use the platform, not only for questions, but during the session, we are going to have surveys and we will ask you to vote. So I invite you all to go to the page. You don't have to download the app, you just have to go to the page and use the code CLT18, and once you are in the page, they will ask you if you want to go to room A or room B. This is room A, and then you can place your questions. You will also have the surveys there in that page. Bruno will be inviting us to participate in the surveys and vote. That will be the innovation for this session. Now I leave you with the moderator of the panel. Can you hear me? Thank you. Morning to all of you. I want to thank the presence of all of you here and hope we will have an interactive session. I would ask Sergio explain if you can enter the system, leo.com, because we're going to use the page, we're going to have surveys, and you will have 30 seconds to answer the questions. You have to pay attention. This session is a session on ICTs, information and communication technologies for the implementation of SDGs. This panel will share with you the best practices to implement the goals that were signed in 2015 by all countries at the United Nations. This is a very serious task, and we have to work on public policies as the basis for the implementation of sustainable development goals. We have representatives of different sectors. I'm going to introduce them one by one, and we will be talking about how we can implement Goal 17 that talks about alliances and cooperation among the different economic agents the government sector, the private sector, the academia, non-governmental organizations. So the goal number 17 is how we can implement this, and I think this is very important. So now I will introduce Mr. Pau Castel. He's director of PSMA. Sorry, GSMA. Then we have Mrs. Tricia Baltasar. She is the Service Development Manager of Canto.
Thank you very much, Tricia, for being here.
Tricia will speak in English, so if you need the translation services, you have to go and get your earphones. Then we have Mr. Cristobal Stable Gutierrez, IT Technology Assistance from FAO, and Mr. Ernesto Rodriguez Hernandez, IT Director General of the Cuban Ministry of Communications. So we have here operators, private sector, governmental organizations, UN organizations, and governments with the Ministry of Communication of Cuba. I think it's a very interesting panel on the different visions regarding implementation. As I said, this will be an interactive panel. Let's use a platform that you have in the screen. You can send questions if you want. The idea is to ask questions to you so that this will be more dynamic. I will be making questions, you will be answering, and if you want to make questions, you're most welcome also. I would like to start with Pau. The GSMA vision regarding experience of the mobile industry, that in general terms it has quicker access. How can we use this platform in terms of implementing the SDGs? Thank you. Thank you, Bruno. It's a pleasure for me to be here at this Latin American Telecommunications Congress. The experience of the mobile industry is quite interesting, and I would like to share with you this experience. I would like to highlight that the mobile industry was the first industry worldwide that committed itself systematically and in a transparent manner to monitor the progress that we are making since 2 years back. Why do we do this? Because we believe it's essential to say that the mobile industry is essential to attain these goals, and I would say that without mobile industry, they will not be attained. Yesterday at the opening session, we talked about the share of the mobile industry in the economy. It's 5%. And I think the economic impact will continue to increase as we digitalize our economy. The economic impact, it's just a part of the overall impact of this industry, because the social impact is even wider. And that is one of the reasons why for 2 years now we have published this report that I'm going to show here. It's called Mobile Industry Impact Report. It is published by GSMA. It is in our webpage. I recommend you check it up. And what we did in this report, for the different goals, we measured the contribution of the mobile industry to each goal. There is a lot of data, and it's easy to understand. We give a value from 0 to 100 for each goal. There are goals where the industry does not contribute anything. I mean, that is 0. And this is monitored to see the progress that is being made. An interesting thing to highlight about this work we do in GSMA, the contribution will be different in accordance with the goal. In goal number 9, the role of the industry is fundamental, while in other goals, like goal number 14, though the industry may work very hard, it won't have much impact on achieving or not this goal. So this is a second report. In each goal, the contribution of the industry has improved, and these are good news. Second thing we should highlight, the contribution of mobile industries for Latin American goals is in line with the rest of the world, and even higher. These are also good news. The third aspect is that the average contribution of the industry to the goals is 32 over 100. In 2017, we contributed 32% of what can be contributed to attain the goal. So there is great margin for improvement, and that is why we should contribute. We have been talking about the goals. I think we are beyond that phase. I think we are at the phase of local implementation and progress monitoring. And these tools are important to see where we are making progress, where we are not making progress. Is there any other mic so that we can share mics? No. Pao's remarks are very interesting, as well as the SMA report. I don't know if we can show the first survey. Pao has mentioned the percentage of the industry's contribution to each goal. Okay, so this is an analysis of the impact of the industry. For me, I think it is, the impact is not so big. I can't read here. Well, maybe it's my side, maybe it's my age. Here we have the first survey, and the question would be, in your view, ICTs are basic for implementing all SDGs? It is a question that is related to what Pao mentioned. There is a question that says only, or an answer that says only education and health. I'll give you 1 minute for you to place your answers, and after that I'll give the floor to Tricia. Let's think about what Pau has said about the role of the industry in each goal. For example, are ICTs important for all the SDGs? I'm going to speak now in English.
I'm going to talk right now to Tricia. Considering, you know, what Paul said about the industry role in the implementation of the SDGs, talking about the membership of Canto, what is one of the challenges facing the membership related to that? Because the industry, as Paul said, so has a role in implementation, as the report shows, but about the membership, what in the Canto's view is the role to the implementation of the membership?
Can you all hear me? Cantor role is very important. As you are aware, our composition is about, I would say, almost 60% operators and the balance suppliers. So we have about 125 members, 33 of which, oh, sorry. Thank you, sorry. 33 of which are operators. So the SDGs are very fundamental to our organization. One of the challenges we've noted from our members is one of finance and technical resource. The SDGs are very aggressive goals, 17 goals, and the timeline as well is very, I mean, 2030 is just around the corner when you really think about it. So that's aggressive as well. And then you have the challenge of finance and the resources and the technical resources to facilitate these goals. We are aware that ICT is the common thread throughout all the 17 goals. I mean, if you look at each one of them, ICT is going to play a fundamental role in each in order to achieve those goals. And the idea that the finance is a challenge for most. How we can assist with that, how can the agencies and all the stakeholders can assist is one to be seen, but we know for sure that there are things that the actual government from the respective countries can do in terms of policies, in terms of maybe tax breaks, different little things that they can do to support the system, because at the end of the day, the SDGs is going to benefit everyone, but for the operators to be more challenged to do what they're supposed to do, they would need some sort of financial assistance from the government and other bodies. I had read somewhere that something like the goal for the budget for the SDGs in the realm of 3 to 5 trillion, which is quite a bit and quite aggressive. So those are the things that I think is one of the major challenges.
Yeah, thank you. You know, continuing a little bit more, and in your view, okay. So the importance of all SDGs. If I don't know if because the poll is not on the screen right now, but if I remember well, in the 22 answers, we have 95% on yes. So ICTs are very important or crucial, the implementation of all SDGs. But going a little bit further, Tricia, what is the Canto's role in this? Because talking about the membership, this is important. It's very, you know, ICTs are crucial in the implementation. But what is the Canto's role in terms of proliferation of SDGs?
One of our main role with our members is more of advocacy. We advocate for the SDGs. We create white papers or create documents on SDGs to support the SDGs so that they're aware of it. When we have our main meetings, and especially the one coming up in July in Panama, there will be a forum which supports the SDGs and as to what the operators are doing to support the same. So our main goal is advocacy and support with our members to ensure that they are in line with the SDGs.
Thank you so much. Yo voy entonces pedir a Sergio alguna pregunta ya que te pueda. Ustedes también pueden enviar
Sergio to send his questions. You can send the questions to the panelists as well. Going to more practical matters, Tricia spoke a little bit about the matter of the importance for the members in the part of the SDGs, and also the role of the organization of Cantus in the support to the implementation for the members. Now, getting to the more practical aspects. For example, I wanted to ask Mr. Cristobal about the examples of practical use of FAO and the implementation and the outreach of the achievement of the goals. Good morning. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, and continue to basically share our experience in this regard. Today I will concentrate on how our work has influenced the compliance of the SDGs, and I will relate it to the applications that probably have been mentioned before. But I will connect it so that you can get the relationship with it. And that opportunity, I mentioned applications that have already been proven in regions such as Africa and Asia, using mobile technology, not the most advanced, but at least the basic, the ones that use SMS, and it's not yet using the full potential of smartphones. When I spoke about that, I mentioned some applications like CURA, the healing of the animals in agriculture. And that application had as a main goal, in connection with FAO's goal, we always take in mind the first and second goal, that is eradicate poverty and hunger, always taking into account SDG number 13, that is to do it in a sustainable and environmentally sound way. And always we get involved in goal number 5, that is gender equality. This is a start point for all our projects. And in that project we saw the description of all the different diseases that animals could suffer. It also provided real-time warnings in case of epidemics. And there is a lot of knowledge as well about the experience of many cattle raisers. We could see that it has an impact in other goals, like the education of producers. It also has an impact in the health of humans, since we know that human health depends a lot on animal health and the health of the products we consume. And we continue to establish a relationship, and this application also impacted the goal number 8, because it gave a decent job to many cattle raisers and also impacted the economic growth of these cattle raisers, improved their quality of life. And we realized that it had a relationship with the ecosystems. We are having an influence in cattle raising and livestock at large, and making things the way it should be. So we can go on, and giving more examples where the use of ICT is with more recent and updated technologies, intelligent detection, using the pre-existing infrastructure like satellites, and especially the processing of the image associated to different species related to fisheries. It impacted on goal of sustainable development and innovation of infrastructure. It also impacted the goal of the alliances. Since in many of these projects, we established alliances with companies like Google. And if I continue providing examples, then we can see that to achieve the most important goals using ICTs, we would impact many other goals relevant to it. I don't know if you have any specific question I could answer, because I just don't want to take much time mentioning other applications that wouldn't have a big impact, but still have some sort of influence in the completion of the SDGs. Thank you, Mr. Cristobal. I would ask you a little bit more in regards to the matter of the work of health. How would there be a more practical involvement of the project? Well, so we started from the idea that health, human health, was the result of health in everything that humans consume. So we concentrate in producing healthy food, raising healthy animals, and that would impact the health of people at large. Also,
no, porque la cuestión ahora es
now the matter is,
la salud es el objetivo número 3.
So health is goal number 3.
Solo para cerrar, yo voy
and just in closing, I will take this topic here, and just in closing, the first poll, which in your view, ICTs are the basis for the implementation of all the SDGs. That is 92% according to the poll today. 26 answers, 92% agree, 4% says no, and only education is health, none. So it's clear that ICTs are the foundation for, are basic for the 16 goals plus the 17, which is the alliances. So we were talking with Cristobal about the fact that in general terms, it's believed that health is basic. I wanted to start with a second poll now.
Vamos a actualizar. Todavía no.
Let's update.
La segunda encuesta.
The second poll.
In
terms of SDG 3, health, there are many projects of electronic health. Actions are needed for public policies by governments. Do we only need actions from the private groups? And is there a need of other actions? Now we are going to discuss further with you, Cristobal, about why this and that. The issue of work with food and agriculture and health. So that's an important topic for the well-being of people. We go to the second poll. The second poll is open. Now we get back to Ernesto from the Ministry of Communications in Cuba. How Cuba uses ICTs to implement these SDGs. Thank you, Bruno, for this opportunity of sharing this panel. Good morning, everyone. If I may, I would like to share what add this with the audience and make public my response to the first question. So there are several studies and informations that are in the internet and address the combination of ICTs with the SDGs. Some speak about 3, 4, 11, and 9. But I consider that ICTs are not just an articulating element for the compliance of the SDGs, but they are going to be a catalyst for the work in these goals. Now, what is the Cuban experience? Cuba, at its highest level of government, has foreseen a national economic development program for the year 2030, national plan which integrates all the social forces of the country, or economic forces of the country, and just as it did with the Millennium Goals, it works towards the completion of the SDGs. We obviously have to address technology as part of this. And for the sake of this, Cuba, in the area of ICTs, approved about a year ago a policy for the informatization, as we call it, of the Cuban society. A policy that is centered in the people, that uses technologies for the sake of the development of human beings. Now, we talk about technologies and SDGs. I like to provide an overview from 3 main components. First, the infrastructure component, and there Cuba works in a strategy of access, not just for the massive and inclusive use of these technologies, but also a use that empowers the human sustainable development of the Cuban society. A second area is that of human capital. We do nothing with technologies if we don't have enough capital, ready capital, to export these technologies. Cuba is a poor country. Consequently, human capital is its most important asset. And we have been working for many years, and for the 50-some years of revolution towards this goal. Cuba has tens of thousands of professionals in the fields of ICTs. It is translated into thousands of professionals that are working oriented towards the completion of the SDGs and the work of placing the technology and placing human beings first and in attaining the goals and indicators. And there is a third element that I cannot ignore in the area of the infrastructure and human capital, and it has to do with the vision of the year. And it's a fact that is one of the most important challenges of the Latin American countries, the production of content and services that can be attractive to our societies. And in this regard, the country has always worked and is taking steps, especially, and I believe it is an important aspect to be considered, and matters related to the SDGs, because content production, cultural content production, and the identity-related content production for the preservation of our culture and values, and therefore the very development of our nation. Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. Arno, can you hear us well? The presentation is very interesting, what Don Ernesto has said, and I wanted to ask, you have mentioned something interesting about the big number of professionals working in this area. I wanted to get into the question of capacity building of these professionals. If we are talking about a large number of persons, we must have training. We must have people properly trained for that purpose. It's not just a number. And we are going to get into the poll that we have here on health. But it's interesting for me the fact that we have almost 100% into views that we need joint actions of the government and private initiative and government policies as well.
Esta segunda cuestión de hace falta acciones políticas de gobierno con un 44%.
The 44% of the government actions is interesting. Basically, half of the room believes that the government must act one way or another in terms of policies. Transparency, which is essential, and obviously it's very straightforward. But I would ask you two things. First, regarding this question of the number of persons and the capacity building, the training for this, because this is very important. And the work of the ITU, one of the most important jobs of the Development Office is the capacity building. And then, why this response of almost half of the room saying that they still believe that the governments must have a bigger action in terms of policy? That's for health, but I'm trying to provide a more broad approach. Well, thank you, Bruno. Answering your first question, to say that in the area of training associated to technologies, and Cuba, and every single province, there are universities that train very good professionals in the area of ICTs and several specialties, from engineering, the degree in ITs, as well as the major in cybernetics and the telecom engineering, electronics engineering, and automation engineering, not just in college or universities. The training in technologies is also present in the mid-level technicians and in several specialties, many of which actually match the target of the university degrees. For many, is none, especially the developments that in terms of education Cuba has achieved. Areas which are connected to the training and capacity building, and not just from the professional training in general, but also as part of the postgraduate studies. Many different programs and curricula are in place, master's degrees, PhD degrees, that have been implemented in the area of technologies in Cuba. There is an interesting experience connecting the training of role and the productions, that is the University of Information Sciences. Yesterday we had a member, a representative of that university as part of the IT-related development projects in Cuba. Regarding the second question, and I think that the actions in terms of government policies for the technologies in health are vital, and I would say more from the question that you made. I think that the government policies are central for the progress of technologies in each and every one of our countries. So when I answered your question, I didn't mention that the policy for the informatization in Cuba is a government policy. Only we see the only way to move forward, to advance the changes, the only way to do is what the government policy, what the state-sponsored policy. Thank you.
Esta cuestión de la capacitación, de educación, es una cosa muy,
This area
muy
of
importante.
training and capacity building is important. So I would give the floor now to the other panel members. If they want to state any stand, any position as to this area of training the person and training the public, because we know that one of the areas where ITU is keen to address and to develop is measuring the capacity of information society. Is MIS in English or MIS report, Measuring Information Society? And that report has the matter of digital skills.
That would be the digital abilities of the person. For Patricia, I would like to know if you would like to talk about the abilities of persons that are going to design public policies, but the population at large in terms of attaining the SDGs. I don't know who would like to talk first. I'll pass the mic to Paul. Thank you, Bruno, for us and linking the training with the importance of strategic alliances. I think that GSMA, we work to promote within the mobile industry, to work together. We have more than 300 operators throughout the world. And we are promoting training activities as part of our We Care program. We work together with the United Nations to promote child protection against existing dangers and the misuse of internet. We have agreements in 14 countries with public authorities to work together with the public sector. And I think this is very important. Regarding the health issue, I think, Bruno, you mentioned that there are two options as to if we should have the involvement of the private and public sector, or if we need more involvement by the governments. I think that public health is a priority for society and for governments, and this should be led by the private sector. My idea is that we should highlight the Big Data for Social Good program in GCMA, where we have operators in more than 100 markets that are working together to test big data solutions in their networks so as to improve public health problems like, for example, pollution. I think there is an interesting work being carried out by Telefónica in Sao Paulo, where they are using networks to measure atmospheric pollution and to alert users, particularly users with respiratory disorders, so that they can go to a safe place. Obviously, training is very, very important, and they could be important in this regard, and it could cover other aspects.
Gracias, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
Tricia,
Tricia,
returning a little bit about the capacity building to not only the government and the staff and the people that are going to implement the public policies, but also for the general public. What are your opinion about this and what we can do?
It's very important that the public be educated, and Council plays a very important role in that. For us, it's one of the tenets in terms of e-learning. We facilitate a lot of workshops. In fact, we have one coming up with GSME in Panama, but we do lots of workshops to promote learning basic computer skills for the persons in rural areas. We had a big workshop in 2017 where we trained over, I want to say over 30 senior citizens. They were above 60, just to be able to understand how to use the computer, how to use the internet. So for us, training is important for the layman on the road. Another thing we do is we support our members in terms of promoting their own educational tenets. For example, we do a MOU with companies like Walden universities that promote e-learning, even with UE, which is the University of the West Indies, where they have telecommunication careers and subjects that we promote as well. So for us, education is important. Educating in the ICT sector is important, not only at, like you said, at the level of professionals, but on the man on the street, because at the end of the day, if they have if we have to meet the SDG goals, they also have to be enabled so that they can create their own goods and services and their own markets, etc.
Thank you so much. Don Cristóbal, entonces tu visión.
Don Cristóbal, your vision on this. Well, one of the main functions of FAO is knowledge management, and we try to fulfill this as much as possible, to provide knowledge to those who are going to produce. So, on this basis, when in Latin America, for example, there is a project, we analyze the skills and abilities of the personnel. So we generate activities so that the producers can learn. In Guatemala, we have communication modules. These modules contain videos to show producers how they have to carry out their work, as well as experiences in other places. We also teach in the language of the population in the rural areas. It's not only in Spanish. We have organized workshops or seminars in Maya, for example. With the most recent apps, there is a financial app on, it's M-Pesa. M-Pesa is a financial app. M-Pesa, M means mobile, and Pesa is in Swahili, which means peso. All this has a positive impact. It increases the opportunities for learning. It's also very useful for health. The producer should not only be a well-informed person, and FAO is very much concerned on providing as much information possible by all available means to the producers. It has been shown that health depends on what we consume. So food is very important, and we need people to understand this and increase their knowledge. Thank you, Cristóbal. Information, access to information, to training is the basis for each country, each culture, each society. Make its own decision regarding what is best for each country, bearing in mind cultural aspects and life philosophies in each country. It's very difficult to have a single vision, and that is our work. I think all of us here need to provide the training and build the capacity so that people have the information and can make the best decision, the best practices. I will now avail myself of the opportunity that we have been talking about the education to place survey number 3. To conclude the health survey, I think it was 8% and 40% public policies.
Survey number 4, related to education. The objective goal number 4. There are many e-education projects. We need more political action by governments. We only need private sector actions, and we need joint private and public policies. We have, this is generally on the goal 17. So, survey pool number 3. I will vote here. I won't tell. Let's see, because we have 13. Then we see 14. So I will wait a little bit. I would like to say something about education, but related to the data. Paul spoke a little bit about the G data on health area. I think all sectors will use big data in terms of information and what we can work. There's a question here that I would like to tell to you. Mr. Alexander Barbosa asked how the use of big data can be used to produce official statistics in terms of ICTs, so that can be used for the monitoring of the SDGs. Very good question, Alexander. I will not speak right now, but I will speak on monitoring. This word is very important. How can we monitor in the next few years? This will be very important in the implementation process. But there's an important process in the government in terms of monitoring, and all this is aligned with the goals. So the question would be, as a source of big data, how the big data can be used in every sector. And can you tell us a little bit about your experience in order to implement this and the monitoring of the implementation? Paul. In fact, this program I mentioned earlier, what we do there is that. It's just that. We are exploring with the UN and other organizations on how the mobile data generated in mobiles, how we can track these kind of objectives. Not only the monitoring, that we will further speak a little bit later, but this is done to help and improve reality in issues such as natural catastrophes, education access to health, poverty reduction. So the answer should be a yes, a big yes. Big data is an emerging field. We have challenges ahead in terms of aligning objective and social problems. That's why there should be a joint effort between the private and the state sector. In terms of commercial aspects, so far it's working very good, and the challenge is to find a framework to apply these solutions in aspects in which you won't have a return. So I think this can be possible.
So I'm going to repeat the question. I don't know if for Tricia. We've talked about the education, how it's important. So right now it's linked to this, but let's go into how that the use of big data or use of data. The question from Alexandre Barbosa is how to use big data in order to have statistics and use these statistics, official statistics, to monitoring the implementation and also to see if we are in the right direction. I'm going to talk about monitoring just after, but let's say discuss a little bit about the use of data and the use of big data in order to have official statistics and use the statistics in order to try to find the correct path in the implementation of the SDGs.
I can't really speak to how to use big data because this is not my forte, but I can say that it is a challenge for most of the operators in terms of getting a consistent type of metrics to measure, to use the measurements to facilitate the SDGs, and whatever metrics that has to be used, it has to be consistent, in accord, with the SDGs. I can't say how to use it per se because it's really not, Okay.
Bueno, en cuanto a FAO,
frequently FAO helps government in terms of information and statistics related to food and agriculture. And FAO is aware that needs to be prepared to analyze the information that can be obtained through big data. We are always open to cooperation with all governments, and we give the information in the best way possible. First, to thank Alexander. I think this is not only a question, this is a statement of a possibility of using the big data as an emerging technology to assess and monitoring and assess the SDGs. And I coincide with what Paula said. I'm convinced that this will need all our synergies, both the private sector and the government. And I will dare to say another thing, to add another one, multilateral organizations. As Cristobal said, from his vision of FAO, the capacity of these organizations to use this emerging technology, the big data, in the follow-up and assessment system of the SDGs. I think the key is to find synergy to work and effectively work, use the data now.
Perdón.
Sorry,
Ya estoy con problemas
I think
en la cuestión de anteojos, estoy problemas con
I had problems with my sight, and now I have problems with my mic.
Sí,
Well, yes,
yo voy a preguntar también sobre el uso
I
de
will
Big Data en
ask
cuestiones de
about the
discapacidad.
use of big data in
No sé si
with disability
está satisfecho
issues.
con las respuestas.
I don't know if the audience is satisfied. I don't know if Alexander is satisfied with the answer.
Bien,
Are you satisfied?
Alexander
Yes.
trabaja
So Alexander works
como
as
presidente, como chairman
is
de
chairman
uno de los grupos de
of
trabajo
one
de la
of the
OIT, sobre la cuestión de estadísticas.
ITU statistic project group. We want to speak with him. I think he's very knowledgeable on statistics, well experienced internationally. You can use this forum to exchange with him your experience, because the use of statistics as support to the public policies implementation is crucial for governments and organizations and companies. I would like to ask a specific question to Cristóbal, to FAO, and another for you. About the big data, which is something for me that is important. Sometimes ICT sector, as we have seen on the survey, they are based on the implementation of the goals. But I will later ask about you, about the proper use of the data. Something that today we use a lot of the technology, but we need to have limits in terms of using the personal data information. And how can we make a specific work, but with the protection of the user, of the person using this? The specific question to Mr. Cristóbal is Santavalese. He asked, what policies FAO is using in terms of ICT's implementation in livestock as an international supplier. In terms of livestock, the first example I said today was about an app devoted to livestock. With this app, FAO is trying to find producers. They give them early warning tools in terms of epidemics, so that they can make their own predictions. It is proven that with this early warning system, we have had results, and we had no major consequences because of this. The development of the livestock development, we have tried to be as much as sustainable and healthy as possible. It's a policy we follow. Also in agriculture, we are trying to find sustainable and solutions to produce. That's the guideline we follow, because as I said before, we are aware that what we consume will translate in the health we will have in the future. I don't know if this will answer your question. Thank you very much. Going back to, let's start closing our panel about the monitoring. I would like to start from Ernesto now.
Un poco con respecto a la parte del monitoreo.
In terms of monitoring of implementation, tell us about the Cuba experience, and maybe we can speak a little bit about data, statistics, also about the ethical use of the information. So I will ask you about the monitoring part and management. What is the Cuba experience, so we can learn a bit? And then the proper ethic use of the information, how it is done. Don Ernesto? The Cuba experience, according to the Cuba experience, there's a National Statistics and Information Office which is in charge not only about the statistics work, but also they coordinate the follow-up actions, assessment, monitoring actions on how the SDGs are fulfilled. And this office coordinates everything, taking into account the information by the different organizations of the Cuban government. And they participate in in the consecution of each of the SDGs. The second question you made related to the data promotion. I consider, this is my personal opinion, this subject goes beyond regulation. We need regulations that protect personal information. But I think this depends on the sociological and cultural character of the society. And all the actors that somehow make use of the information, personal information, we should be aware of this. The Cuban experience at the beginning of the panel, I spoke about our policy of digitalization of the society. As part of that policy, at the highest level of the government in Cuba, we are working on the regulatory standard that will protect all this personal information. But I insist that this has a very cultural point of view and sociological point of view for us. And another point that is important is the responsibility of those involved, and they must use responsibly that personal information.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Going to give the floor to Tricia to talk about a little bit about the monitoring scheme for the SDGs, how to use the data and to even try to redirect the activities. And I don't know if you can, but just try to talk a little bit, as Ernesto said something about the ethic use of the data that we are going to use in order to monitor the implementation of the SDGs. Tricia.
Okay. The ethics of the data is quite important. I mean, we're aware of what's happening now in terms of data sharing, etc., with all the data gathering that we have. So one has to be very, very cautious. Thankfully, in the sector that I am in, the Canto sector, we don't have as much private data or access to personal data. But we know that our members do, and they have access to it. They have, so I know it's an issue for them. And it also is going to be part of our discourse. So one of the things we want to do at Canto is to have that level of discussion. I can't speak to it's in detail, but I know that we are going to have that discussion in light of what is happening and how to address using and the ethics behind the big data.
Many thanks. Don Cris... No. Paul?
I think there are two aspects in terms of monitoring contribution of ICTs to SDGs, and I think we have the answer in part here. We are checking to what extent ICTs are being used to improve health, etc., etc., etc. So part of the solution is here. The second aspect in terms of measurement is a little bit more complex. We need to measure the goals as such. Obviously, here we have problems in terms of privacy and use of personal data. I think we have an interesting experience in the industry. Dissemination of personal data without protection could be very harmful, individually speaking. But as to measuring the goals, I'm optimistic. I think that we have to work together. That is to say, the industry, the public sector, the intergovernmental agencies, and I'm very optimistic. I think that the main problem right now is local implementation. We need to study what is happening and what is not happening with the goals, because some of the goals are quite ambitious, and we have to work together. Yes, good. We're almost concluding here. We have 5 minutes left. I'm going to put forward 2 questions. And I'll give you the floor to each of you on these 2 questions. I have to choose which question because we don't have much time. The 2 questions are by Isabel Granup Lozada of the Ministry of Communications of Cuba are how ICTs impact on the GDP of each country, and are there any indicators designed for this purpose? And the second question, I don't know if you can answer both of them, because I need also to give you the floor for your closing remarks. Second question is, what regulatory measures can we implement to favor the public and private sector alliance for Goal 17? And this question is by Mr. Lorenzo Sartre. So I'll give the floor to each of you for your answers and closing remarks. And I would like you to answer these 2 questions I have mentioned. We start with Mr. Ernesto, so that the closing remarks will be by you. Regarding the first question, I believe that yesterday in the presentation by Professor Raul, he illustrated how ICTs have a significant contribution to the economies and GDPs of the countries. And I think that he highlighted in his presentation, that sometimes we assess the direct contribution of ICTs to GDP, but we don't measure the indirect contribution, which is much more difficult to calculate or translate. But it is also the contribution that contributes, it's the highest contribution to the GDP, numerically speaking. I think that is a challenge. Even for our country, we are immersed on trying to calculate as accurate as possible the contribution of ICTs to the GDP. It is undeniable that it is an essential contribution, a vital and real contribution. There are indicators to illustrate this, but I reiterate, the most complex aspect is in measuring the indirect contribution of ICTs to GDP. As to the second question, and very, very briefly, I do believe that we can design regulatory measures to regulate the participation and commitment of both the public and private sectors to the attainment of the SDGs. The most important thing is for all of us to be aware of the importance of working together, both the public and private actors, to attain these sustainable development goals, particularly because what they represent for the well-being and welfare and even survival of the human race as a species in the near future. Thank you. For final remarks, I give the floor to Mr. Cristobal. Well, in fact, we are convinced that undoubtedly ICTs have a significant impact on the GDP of each country, and we are convinced that whatever the size of this contribution, ultimately we will be able to increase the GDP. To calculate this is difficult, but I think we all have to be convinced of the importance. As to regulations regarding the partnership between the public and private sector, as it has been mentioned, we are convinced that in the Union we will find the solution to our problems. As an international organization, we have to take into consideration the regulations in each country, and we try to promote partnerships between these two sectors to obtain the best results in our projects. Thank you, Cristobal. Tricia, you have the floor.
And also to, talk a little bit about these two questions. One on the use of ICTs and the relation with the GDP, and also related to how to implement and how to have public policies or to use some regulatory measures in order to have these public policy alliances. Tricia.
Great. It is the impact of ICT on GDPs is huge. I think it's well documented. In the case of Haiti, it was in one of my readings, it stated that with Digicel entering the market, the GDP of Haiti increased by almost 20%. So we know that telecommunications and ICT does impact GDP. To some areas, I think it's like 5%, etc. So it plays a major role, and we'll continue to see that increase. And that's just the direct impact. We're not even sure how it's going to be the indirect impact, which is even more because of the amount of services that are spurred from ICT and telecommunications. In terms of the regulatory framework, that is a challenge for most, especially I speak for the small island states. It's very important that we have a regulatory framework that embraces the operators and helps them to foster even more programs to support the SDGs. So the regulators, the governments, and the private sector, they have to work together to be able to meet those goals. And we have to foster the environment and create an environment that all can work in harmony so that we can all profit.
Thank you so much, Tricia. Paul?
Bien, en cuanto al aporte.
As to the economic contribution of the industry to the GDP, I fully agree with the rest of the members of the panel. Every year we publish this report on mobile economy. We measure the direct and indirect contribution and even the productivity. As to the second aspect, I believe it is essential to be aware of the challenge of achieving these goals, and the digital divide is essential. 50% of Latin Americans have no access to internet or the mobile industry. We have problems with the supply, with the demand, and we have to see how we can improve access in the rural areas. Here, public policies are essential, but there is also a gap in demand. Today, 35% of Latin Americans live in areas where there is access to internet, but they do not connect. So we need to take into consideration also specific taxes, because this is additional cost. And to conclude, I would like to thank ITU for inviting me to be part of this panel. It has been a pleasure, and we should start working together on Goal 17. Thank you, Paul. Well, we've come to the end of this session. And before I thank you all for your participation, I would like to make a summary. I like to do that. I don't like leaving the room without having something on which I can reflect. I think we have heard about the importance of information and communication technologies for all SDGs. Here we have the last survey, which is more aligned to the public and private alliances. Here we have 61%. In the case of health and education, we had 53%. So in general, this is a vision regarding alignment with Goal 17. And we need to know why we are here. Why are we here in this room? And we're not at the beach, which is so beautiful here in Cuba. Why? Because we are looking for new ideas to implement our vision. And this is very important. We need to create alliances. We need to check other visions. And as Mr. Ernesto has said, we have to work together. That is why we are here. This is the summary of this session. We have discussed also a lot about education. I think ITU The director of the development office is always or has always been concerned with the priority of training. We need to train people, we need to build capacities, we need people to know how to use these technologies and the content after having access. Because access will not help you if you cannot manage contents in terms of social and economic development. Then we had to use this space to discuss SDGs that have to be in our agenda. We need to know how many SDGs we have, what is SDG number 3, number 4, what is SDG number 3, health, SDG number 4, education. Yeah, you have 10, all of you. Now, second, education, and then to wrap up these statistics, ITU has this report on the measurement of information society, MIS report, measuring the information society report that will be published this year. TIS, I think it will be in December. And for your information, the members of ITU are working on a new methodology to find indicators for ICTs and increasing economic activities. Among the questions, we have a very important issue to provide reliable indicators, so that you can search for the data, compile data, and then analyze the indicator. This is I'm publicizing the report, but I think it is important to have reliable data and to give you the information so that you can work and make your own analysis and implement the public policies of each country. So to conclude, I thank all the members of the panel. It was an honor for me to be here with you. I thank you all for your participation. I don't know if you liked the surveys or not. Next time we will see who is the best moderator. I'm not asking now because maybe I lose. So once again, I thank you all. I thank Sergio over there because he has worked a lot. Sergio Scarabino, who is the head of the ITU office for South America. I want to thank Sergio for putting up this panel and all of you for your participation. Thank you.